I'm Brenda Wineapple, and I'm the author of The Impeachers, The Trial of Andrew Johnson and the Dream of a Just Nation. When I would tell friends that I was working on a book about the impeachment of Andrew Johnson, the president in the United States, the first president ever to be impeached, people would look at me and ask, why was I spending all of my time, years of research and writing, on a book about an impeachment of Andrew Johnson? It seemed like an absurd topic to them. But I also realized that part of the reason that was the response I'd get was that no one really knew very much about the first ever impeachment of an American president. And that itself was what interested me in this particular topic. I was fairly well educated, and I realized that I didn't know anything about the first ever presidential impeachment, and that seemed odd to me, particularly because it occurred not long after the first ever presidential assassination, the assassination of Abraham Lincoln, which occurred right after, just about, the end of the Civil War, that brutal Civil War that killed at least 750,000 men, and we don't even know how many women and children, and what they call collateral damage. So how could the first ever presidential impeachment of Andrew Johnson, who had been Lincoln's vice president before he took over at the assassination, how could that be something that was unknown, forgotten, belittled, considered trivial, considered perhaps a partisan mistake, which is how I'd always heard about it. And in fact, that's how JFK, John Kennedy, really wrote about it in Profiles in Courage, that Pulitzer Prize winning book. So that piqued my curiosity. What happened? What was the real story? And why didn't we know about it? Was it just because it was inconsequential? But as I said, that couldn't be. And that's where I started this particular book. And all the time I was working, I was thinking, what were the issues? So I went back, and among the many things I read the transcripts of the trial. And trials, as I've come to learn from that and books that I've written subsequently, trials are inherently dramatic. And nothing was more dramatic than this trial, where the direction of the country, where it was going, was deeply at stake because the war had just been fought, slavery was over, and yet there were, 2 million formerly enslaved people who now, had to be taught to learn to read and write because they had been deprived of not only literacy, but citizenship, the ability to move around, to marry whom they wanted, all kinds of rights. They were there, and so what was the former Confederate states? What to do with them? Can you let them back into Congress? These are really amazing and very, very difficult issues. They were all part of the trial. And as I came to learn, the issues of the trial can be summarized in one very loaded, very powerful, very disturbing word, and that word is race. The issues were the racial issues because, after all, it was Andrew Johnson who said, this is a white man's country and it shall be a white man's government. And those were the reasons, really, behind his impeachment. There were many people who had fought in that war, in the Civil War, who did not believe that this was a white man's country. Not at all. That's not what they fought for, and they wanted to make sure that the values that they had held dear, and the values that they wanted for a future America, would be upheld, and Andrew Johnson was actually standing in their way. That's what the story of the impeachment has to do with. That's the story of the dream of a just nation that the impeachers fought for.